Welcome to Freedom Speaks. This is episode 9. It's so lovely for all of you to be with me and some special guests today. So this weekend was the Lion's Gate, or just on Monday, yesterday was the Lion's Gate, and incredibly powerful energies that were released to us. But I'm sure you all felt the impact of that opening of that portal of divine light that was flowing into all of us, particularly as it brought up a lot of different things for many different people, all different aspects of different things, but under one real theme that I can perceive. And that theme was really around old wounding, around habitual patterns of creation, and around aspects of us that are not healed. Really, it brought up also tremendous amounts of suffering. And that's really what I want to talk today about, is suffering and healing. And what does it mean in the context of what we actually are going through? There's no doubt in my mind that the world is going through a healing crisis at the moment, nor any doubt that we are going through that there's tremendous suffering in the world. Now, if you think of suffering, how do we actually view suffering? Is there any meaning to suffer? Is there anything that we get actually from suffering? In coaching circles, there's a truism which says that behind every behavior is a positive intention. So if we create behaviors that create suffering, what is the positive intention in our suffering? So I wanted to give you a sense of a different way to look at what it means to heal and what suffering actually really is. It's a way of looking at suffering that'll actually enlighten us to a certain degree, or perhaps inspire us to move out of our suffering and to choose consciously to move into the state of healing. So healing is the will to awake. Consider that as an incredible statement of truth. Healing is the will to awake. All forms of sickness and pain are physical expressions of the fear of awakening. They are attempts to remain unconscious out of a fear of becoming conscious. Let me just read that again, because that's just so powerful. All forms of sickness or pain are physical expressions of the fear of awakening. They are attempts to remain unconscious out of a fear of becoming conscious. So the world itself, which is in tremendous suffering at the moment, the long dark night of the soul, is really going through an awakening crisis. And it's the resistance that we have to the awakening of ourselves, which actually creates so much more of that suffering and pain within us. So we have this tremendous amounts of resistance to awakening. And perhaps we don't really know what awakening is. Well, when Buddha was asked who he was after he had enlightened, he simply said, "I am awake." So if we're not awake, then we're obviously in a state of sleep. So we're in a state somewhere between sleep and awake. And I think the most real pain for us comes in two places during that journey. It comes from the place where we are starting to awaken, but we are moving through tremendous amounts of shadowy feelings within us, tremendous amounts of fear, tremendous amounts of doubt, perhaps, or emotional wounding. That's one of the places where we really feel that. The second place where we feel tremendous amounts of fear, and this is mainly for the or suffering for the light workers, is when you have an awareness of yourself, of something that you believe that is true about yourself. A new awareness, perhaps it's a state of identity, a new state of identity, or a new awareness of what's possible for you, but you fail to act on that awareness. So we have this thing, perhaps you think, wow, I can really do this in my life. But then the fear steps in, the old programming steps in, the wounding steps in, and we don't take those steps towards, or that action towards that, with that new understanding, with perhaps an infusion of love for ourselves to take those powerful steps to move us forward in the life. That creates tremendous amounts of suffering, even if it's not conscious. Perhaps one day we just wake up and we just feel pretty terrible about ourselves, and we don't actually know real reason why. Well, the reason why really is because we have a new awareness. We have awoken. And because we've awoken now, we have this new awareness, but we fail to implement that awareness in our lives. Now think of this as a beautiful allegory. The way you wake up is a symptom of the way you slept. So if you don't sleep very well, you know that the shadow normally kicks in at times when we're in tremendous stress, or times of when we haven't slept very well, or when we're very close to our family. Those are the three main times where we actually experience lots of shadow. So when we are very tired, that shadow comes onto us because it's almost in some ways the way we slept wasn't very good. Therefore, we wake up feeling like that, and now we have to transcend that. But why do we sleep very badly? And what does sleep really mean? Well, sleep in this context is really the state of not being aware of your true self, nor acting with that awareness, nor being the love or the wisdom or the power that we truly are. That's what it means really to be asleep, to be not aware of yourself. It means to be in the state of unreality, not really in a state of realness, but buying into Maya, delusions, illusions. So when we're awake, we simply have bought into those patterns, and now we're waking up. It becomes tremendously painful because we have to give up those delusions, and we have to give up all of those miscreations. Now, in the world today, as we are in this healing crisis, systems are breaking down. And that's really was one of the aspects that causes the pain for us, when these systems that are in the world start to break down. When our own personal systems, our family systems break down, our relationships that we're in break down, perhaps it's our partners, our romantic, or perhaps it's our work break down. Why is that the case? Why do those systems actually break down? Well, I want to give you a little bit of a scientific explanation for those systems and why they break down and why it causes so much pain for us. The human creations, when we create or make things as human beings, whether it's relationships or work or creations of buildings or creations of structures and etc., we create that. If we create that in a matrix that is not in a perfect created matrix, it is not using the creative power in the harmonious, fullest harmonious expression of love, wisdom, and power. What we are going to infuse in that creation is a spiral of disintegration already. So within every single thing we have in the world, there is already built in a spiral of disintegration. So we have the law of transfer of energy, where we transfer this energy, gets transferred to us daily. We are creating, either we're creating in harmonious perfection, which then means we create something that is solid, something that has a spiral of integration built within it, or we're creating something that has a spiral of disintegration. We can think of all of our sacred labor in that way. Our own business, One Healing Presence, is it created in a spiral of integration or a spiral of disintegration? Well, myself and Anna we believe and we hold that matrice for the spiral of integration. In that way, it has permanence. So everything that has not permanence is built within it a self-destructive mechanism that already means that it's in a state of decay. Now, as this transfer of energy starts to increase through that law of the transfer of energy, starts to increase in the world, and we get increasing amounts of light that are coming towards us, so it pushes into those areas of where the destruction or this disintegration spiral is already in, and it starts to break down further and quicker. That's why relationships are breaking up quicker. That's why all of our systems, our economic systems, our political systems, and our big business structures are breaking down. Anything that is not built within some form of integration spiral or some form of harmonious matrix is breaking down. And therein lies the things that we make as human beings. Some of them are pretty beautiful, but none of them are built within this perfected matrix. And so they break down, and that causes us tremendous grief, because that attachment that we have to something that we have made, which is not harmonious nor beautiful, breaks down. That's why relationships fail, why so many divorces are happening in the world today. It's also why we are manifesting so much disease in the world today. I'll read that quote to you again, and then let's discuss this. But all forms of sickness and pain are physical expressions of the fear of awakening. So when we have created disharmonious over long periods of time, that manifests as increasing amounts of illness within the body, or destruction, decay that happens on the physical level. But that first starts off with our emotional patterns of disharmony. The first law of the universe is the law of harmony. That's the most important law to know in the whole universe, is the law of harmony. So now we get this pattern of mental disharmony in our creations. When we are mentally creating something, then holding that electromagnetic field. The electromagnetic field is nothing more than our thoughts being the electric field, and the magnetic field being our emotional states. That's where we hold this emotional, this matrices. So when we have increasing amounts of suffering, essentially it is the light that is going into those matrices of our electromagnetic field, which simply is our negative thought patterns and belief systems, and our emotional states that are not in harmony within us. It's levels of hatred or self-condemnation or disillusion or pride or selfishness, indecision, rebellion, envy, jealousy, mild dislike. All of those are spirals of disintegration that we hold within us, and we awaken up out of those spirals. Now, so healing is the release from fear of awakening. So we are in this awakening journey. Well, I have perceived in my awakening journey that there are 3 levels of awakening. And after I've just gone through these 3 levels, I want to then just put this out for all of us to have this discussion around some of the things and what it means to you, either around healing or around awakening or around suffering. So the 3 levels of healing, the 3 levels of awakening. And in that beautiful theme, once again, of using kitchen appliances as a metaphor for awakening, we have 3 beautiful petri dishes. I don't know what you would call them, what the scientific term for them is, but 3 measuring dishes, maybe. So if you think of a rocket ship that leaves Earth, as a rocket ship, like that beautiful Saturn rocket ship that we used to see in the 80s and the 90s, that was the NASA rocket ship. It was that beautiful white rocket ship. It was huge at the bottom, and then it was slender and slender and smaller and thinner as it went up. And it had 3 stages in that rocket. The first stage was this the huge amount of combustion that was required in 4 main firing cylinders in order to get that rocket off the Earth, to overcome the electromagnetic field of gravity. So that first stage of the rocket is the first stage of awakening. And what that actually looks like, it's awakening into the electromagnetic field that we have created in our thoughts and our emotional states. So it's all about healing of our emotions, and it's all about healing of our mental states, but mostly about healing of our emotional states. That's why our beautiful spiritual teacher, Matt Kahn, he says, well, who do you become when you don't get your way is the first thing you need to consider as your healing paradigm, because that goes to our emotional wounding. Who do you become when you don't get your way? Or who do you become when others don't get your way? It goes to our emotional wounding. So that's the first stage of that rocket ship when we go through this. So oftentimes people, when they're in that stage, they come and they ask, like, what's the next stage for me? Well, they really want to work out how I'm going to go to the next stage. But that's not really the point. The point is to be present to the stage, the fact that you're in healing. You're in a healing crisis. That is because you're awakening. So if you know that you're awakening, at least it gives you some comfort to do the healing, because you know where you're going. Otherwise, people think, well, what's the point of healing? It just makes me feel terrible. I don't want to feel these things that are coming up for me. I just feel terrible. There's comfort in the fact that you know that you're just in the first stage of releasing that electromagnetic field of the gravity of your own sleep, the own patterns of sleeping. Now, do I wake up every day and for myself feeling joyful? No. So therefore, it's obviously still patterns of my asleepness that are subconsciously still playing through that I'm awakening out of. So I'm in that healing process. And humanity at the moment is collectively in one of these healing levels, either the first level of the rocket ship or the second level, the third level. And we're all in different levels of that, and we can hold this. And those who are in the second or third levels hold the consciousness for those who are in the first level. They help them, because once again, that's the law of transfer of energy. If you're in a higher state of consciousness, what it means that you're holding more light, you can then transfer your light to someone who's not. You can transfer that light through you, rather, to someone who's not in that state of awareness. That's what it means to be a healer, simply to be that transfer of energy for someone else. Which is interesting about this whole concept, because when you transfer energy, energy is not transferred on the basis as a gift. We do not transfer energy as a gift. God does not transfer energy to us as a gift. It's not how it works. It is a loan. We are loaned God's energy. We have to account for that energy. It's the parable of the 10 talents from the Bible, which talks about, the farmer who gives his servants, parcels of land, and or he gives them money, and the farmers go out and what do they do with that money? And some of them multiplies the money and some of them don't. Well, what do we do with that energy and the light that God gives us? It's a loan to us. We are accountable for that. And if we are not using that loan correctly, or misusing that loan of energy we've given, it gets taken from us. Okay. So this loan, this transfer of energy is a loan, and it's a gift. It's not a gift, it's a loan that gets given to us. And therefore, when we are doing healing work with others, we are also giving that as a loan, and therefore there's an investment that we're making in other people. That's why we have to be very conscious of, when we do healing work, of not giving too much. Guilty as charged. That's one of my things. I like to give too much, but I have to have to use the wisdom of doing that, because it's a loan of energy. Okay. That's why we oftentimes in our practice, we look for people who are committed to healing, because they're not committed to healing. All they do is coming for is the daily infusion of Shakti. They want that loan of energy. Okay. So this first stage of healing of the rocket ship is when we're going through this incredible amount of emotional turmoil, and our systems are breaking down, because the spirals of disintegration are coming up quicker and quicker, and so we start to break down. Okay. So what does the second stage of healing look like? Sorry, just to go back to the first stage. One of the aspects of the first stage of healing is developing of the witness. It's a crucial aspect of that. When you get to the second stage, the difference between the first stage and the second stage simply is the fact that you have the ability to witness almost anything in your life and not be triggered. That's the second stage of this rocket ship. So now we've taken this first big colander and now we're in the second one, which is a smaller one. And so we are creating a new mold or a new matrix in our life, consciously, with our thoughts and our electromagnetic field, our feelings. And so we create a new mold now, and hopefully that new mold is nearing closer and closer to levels of perfection, which will make it permanent. So in the second stage, we have the ability to witness, maybe not perfectly yet, but we have the ability to witness. Now, the hallmark of the first stage of awakening is emotional triggering. The hallmark of the second stage of awakening is mental surrender. It is the surrender to the higher self is what we do in the second stage. It is the process of overcoming the mind and overcoming the fears and the mental side. So, the first stage is about emotionality. The second stage is a lot more about surrender and the mental side of things. It is that stage when we go through a whole system change of identity, where we're ready to go through identity. And what we need to do in this stage is to use faith. The fruits of faith are magnificent. You cannot move through this stage without complete faith and trust. It is not possible to break the bonds of a mold without faith and trust in the second stage of awakening. And there's lots we can talk about surrendering and what the process of surrender is. I think that'll be a whole podcast on its own. But I also want to just have some interaction now, to talk about some of these things. So I won't talk too much about the process of surrendering. what I do want to do is just to share screen with you for a moment, because I want to give you the three main holdouts for all human beings generally, on which hold them back from stepping forward or letting go of their subconscious programming. So just consider which one is relevant for you. This is from the Enneagram, which talks about our subconscious fears. And it's a tremendous thing to work with when you really get this for yourself and you can see yourself and catch yourself in that awareness where you're acting out. Remember, we talked about suffering. The suffering really comes in when we have this awareness, but we can't act on this awareness, or we can't embody that awareness. We don't want to embody that awareness. That's really where suffering comes in, where resistance really hits in, when we obstruct the flow of light within us that is waiting for us to awaken. The first subconscious fear, this is, if I let my guard down, I will disappear and become overwhelmed. It's almost like I have to keep a boundary, a resistance to what is occurring in my life, because if I don't keep that resistance, I'll have no sense of identity for myself. It's the fear of the lack of identity. Now, think of it, the difference between a weed and a flower. Weeds have tremendous will to live. That's why they tend to grow bigger than flowers, weeds in gardens. So this will to live, we have this tremendous will to survive of the physical body, which means that we have its opposite, which is the fear of non-existence. That's one of the huge aspects of us that we have to let go, is the fear of non-existence. But that might not be our main pattern of where we hold ourselves back from surrendering completely. It could be this one. If I stop identifying with my own self-image, my worthlessness will be revealed. So I cannot let go of my subconscious fears of letting go, because my sense of identity is built, and inherently I do not think I'm lovable, therefore I'm worthless at a very deep level, and therefore I will not let go unless I can identify with that self-image. Who am I without the self-image? It kind of comes back to that same sense of loss of identity. The third one is, and these are really for the mind types, if I stop strategizing or figuring things out, then life will not support me. It is the fear of, well, it's lack of trust, really. I have to strategize and figure things out because life will not support me otherwise. It's the fear of being dependent on the higher self, when in fact what we're asking is to shift, is to move into being the higher self. So just consider which one really resonates with you. If I let my guard down, I will disappear and become overwhelmed. If I stop identifying my self-image, my worthlessness will be revealed. If I stop strategizing or figuring out, then life will not support me. So that was lots of information over quite a short period of time. I wanted just to share, really is what we're talking about is healing, is the will to awaken, that we have to find that will within us to awaken to our true self and heal. And where you are within those three stages, sorry, I didn't talk about the third stage, I'll just talk about that briefly. The third stage is essentially when you have claimed your true nature and are the embodiment. You would be, I am awake state. That's the third stage of awakening. Okay, so let's talk to these incredible awake beings, their views on any topic that we've raised today, whether it's healing, awakeness, sleep, or you want to share some parts of your personal journey. Who would like to share or comment? Shrek and Donkey are walking down and walking together, and Shrek and Donkeys keep saying, pick me first, pick me first. And Shrek's saying, not you, Donkey, I can't pick you all the time.
All right, I'll go. Gosh, yeah, there's like 1,000. It's like a square. When you do your squares, there's like 15 other squares that come up in one square. So you've made so many amazing points that I don't even know where to begin. But I suppose, yeah, so a couple of points for me, I suppose, in my healing journey, which have been really important, around the willingness to be awake, or the willingness to heal, sorry, or awake,
Yeah.
interchangeable, I suppose, in some ways. I suppose the first thing is that the deep news that you need to hear to heal often is accompanied by dismay and pain, and that's really hard. That's the only time you get to shift gear. Like I should speak for myself. That's how I've experienced my healing journey, is when I felt I have shifted gear and sort of stripped away those layers that are painful and wounded, is in those times where it's really hard. Yeah. The price of breaking, I think, that trance that we live in is really high. But because as humans, I think we're hardwired to belong. We're hardwired to be loved. And I think it's so incredibly difficult and so incredibly brave to do this work, because inevitably things are going to fall away. And I think a big fear around that death is that the people who love us won't carry us. And I think that is a very primal fear, that sort of excommunication out of the tribe that you've created. I know for me, that's the biggest thing. It's still my biggest challenge. When you think about your parents, or, your partner, your sisters or brothers or whatever. And I think also it's just this constant breakdown of these veils of illusion, isn't it? Like when you think about the word illusion, the root of it is ill. Like it's the sick, wow, diseased version of ourself that is, of myself, I should speak for myself, of myself, how I experienced the illusions I had created or allowed myself to believe were these sick, diseased versions of myself, that arose because I was lying to myself and betraying myself. And that's also very hard. And I think the willingness to strip those things away, those illusions, those veils away, only come with deep dives into the underworld. And those are hard. But I always sort of try to visualize almost like going into the fiery depths of the underworld, and you shed skins. But then you come back and you have this amazing sacred offering, I think, to the world. And I think that's where the willingness comes in. And it's really hard because I think culturally we're hungry ghosts. Capitalism has invaded and moved through everything. Even our relationships, everything has become transactional and transitory. And I think because that hungry ghost in us all that is wanting overconsumption of food, of money, of whatever else you want to add in there, that's just a constant internal battle, I think, that goes on within me anyway. But the biggest thing, I suppose, and the last thing that I'll say is those veils of illusions for me built up very quickly and very rapidly because of lack of witnessing. And I think we consciously shun witnessing, because we all have the divine spark in us, and they know the importance of witnessing, because without witnessing, there's no wonder in life, Like you have to be with somebody and be seen to be able to get value out of the wonder of that interaction. You can't do that by yourself, because it's that old adage, right? If you're talking, the only thing you can say is the things you know. But if you're listening, that's when you learn new things. And so witnessing to me is the same thing. And those veils have, in my experience, built up because I was not witnessed in my life. Yeah. And that's not a judgment statement on the people I grew up around. They were operating from the place that they could and the level of awareness that they had.
Yes.
You know, but I do think that's sort of the main points of the willingness to heal, I think, comes from those sort of two things. Yeah. The veils of illusion and allowing yourself to be witnessed and surrounding yourself with people who will witness you.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. That's incredible sharing that. I wonder if we don't have the will to heal, then I guess we're in a victim. That's kind of what we're saying, is we're in victim in that way. Yet I've seen within myself that the times when I wanted to heal, or the times when I was in a healing crisis, there was a willingness to suffer. There was, and I think the difference that I developed over the years was not actually experiencing that and choosing suffering in that moment, but witnessing the ability and then actually willing to heal, which is a whole different outcome on a whole different path. It's I forget who actually said it, but he said that most of humanity want to suffer. There's actually a willingness to suffer. It's really incredible, because if you think of awakening, we're waking out of suffering. There must be an attraction to suffering. So very profound.
Well, I think energetically too, I experience when I go out, like say into town or whatever, or even in relation to my family members, since I've sort of detached and become sovereign in myself, I experience everything else as very soupy.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it's interesting to experience that once you step out of it. Yeah. But my most favorite thing, and I don't know if it's because of the Lion's Gate or because of the great weekend that I had in my personal life, but I feel extremely connected now to this holy rhythm that moves through the world. And I don't have a word for it, but I can feel it. And I think the willingness to get to that point, I just think you need community around you. You need a village. You know, we all come out born hoping that we're going to see 30 pairs of hands and 30 pairs of eyes there to raise us, you know. And at best, we get a really stressed mother who's by herself, if that, you know. And then I think the hungry ghost takes over. And that's where the need for 30,000 followers on Instagram comes in, you know. So it's this really, it's really hard to be awake and heal, I think, in this world now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so incredibly brave to do it.
Yeah, it is. Anna, do you want to comment on that, about what Laura was saying?
Absolutely. I didn't want to interrupt. It was beautiful flow. There's so much we could talk about, so much expand. Like you brought so many topics, but I love beautiful how you put those 3 stages together of healing. Yes. Wow. I remember the quote that I read not long ago from our beloved messengers, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and her dictation, when she said she was talking about awakening in a victorious way. And she said, do you think that you can cross the line from unreality to reality without a fight? And that was so profound when I read it, because truly my whole awakening process and healing process, it is fight. It was a fight. It was a fight between my personality, ego self, with me, because I wanted to awaken. And then I could at every time and every stage that was happening, and I think it's important to talk about our personal experiences at this moment, because you brought so much knowledge already about that fight was being witnessed. Each time the stage was progressing with each step. So I remember, and I will come back to this, but I want to bring one more awareness here before I continue some experiences of my journey. The other quote the other actually wisdom that I always come back to, there's so much pearls of wisdom throughout this time that we gather as we went back to those nuggets, those pearls, because when you have that nugget and that pearl, you can actually expand and bring the more into it and fill in the light. But the teachings of S.C. Nas were actually teachings of our beloved ascended Master Jesus, and they were teaching in their teachings about the three energies present in the world at this moment, at any moment of human history. The one that we can meet within ourselves and the one that we can meet outside of ourselves. And I think that's such a profound teaching, very simple and easy, but it's such a profound understanding, those three energies that are within us and also being reflected outside of us. The first energy that we can meet within us and mirror outside of us, one of them, it doesn't mean that it's first, when we awaken, will be the one that is going to hunt us. It's going to actually hunt us with words or their thoughts, their energies, or their actions. And we have, that's the fight happening there when we are being attacked by our own beautiful ego that is afraid of change, afraid of unknown. Is it afraid that this home is going to be destroyed, the home that it's attached to, that started to be created from the moment of creation of this body, that it's going to disappear, as you mentioned, it's going to stop existing, and where the personality ego will be homed, there will be no place, the identity will be dissolved. So that's the fight within us. But also the same is reflected outside of us. People are afraid of those, the others are afraid of those who are awakened, because that threatens their egos and their fear of being awakened. So they rather stay where they are. So they're gonna fight. They're gonna fight with what they see because of the fear, again, for their own safety. Then the other energies that we can meet within ourselves and what are those who actually out of fear, not going to be attacking, but going to run away from us. And often Laura mentioned that, yes, the world is going to change around us. People are going to leave us. Those guys, they're going to criticize us and judge us and leave us. They don't feel the connection with us because, again, there is the fear that if I will accept your awakened state and the truth that are coming and the energy of the wholeness that are coming through you, I would have to take responsibility for myself, and I would have to look into myself and take some actions to change this asleep state that I'm in, right? That will sparkle that awakened state within them, because that spark within us will affect their spark. It's like ignition will happen, and then wow, and then what I'm going to do with that? So they rather run away. Well, the same energies are playing within us. We might actually run away from ourselves. We might actually distract ourselves with everything possible, and the world is giving us so many distractions here around that it's very easy to run away from ourselves, and very easy to stay and watch the movies, to go into fantasy, to be occupied with other people's lives or other distractions and affairs of the world, rather than going in and out, up, for the guidance of the witness, right? That we mentioned that. Such a beautiful and powerful tool that is allowing us to actually awaken in in such a safe way, because we always have that guide within us, that teacher within us, that healer within us. Only we have to reach into us, into our true hearts, right? And stay in that stillness and listen and listen and listen through that chatter until there is that stillness and silence.
So can I ask you both a question with this that goes, so you have these three energies that you're discussing, the one, the one is hunting you, the one's moving away from you, and the one's embracing you. And that could be...
No, I didn't mention the third one yet.
So sorry, please. Sorry, carry on.
I haven't. That was the two I mentioned. And the third, there will be the one that we meet within ourselves and we meet outside of ourselves, reflected. That will be the one that will embrace us, that will open our arms and say, yes, yes, welcome, beloved brother, beloved sister. That's the soul family. That's where we actually find, when we find that within us, the true embracing of our higher self, of our true self, the self that is real, not the not real one, right? The little self. We're talking about the higher self with a capital S. That's where we're able to actually meet that outside of us. So always remembering that whatever it's inside of us, it's being mirrored outside of us. So whatever we see in the environment and the people, we have to go back and find within us. If we don't like it outside of us, we have to come back and change within us. Find first, acknowledge first, find where it is, understanding what it is, so we can heal it, love it, and then be it.
So, I mean, that was beautiful sharing. So going back to my question then with that for both of you is, these are what you're talking about is systems of control, or systems that we are awakening out of. We talked about the disintegration spiral that are inherent in those systems. It could be relationships, it could be jobs, it could be careers, it could be different statements or versions of yourself. In your life, what awareness did you, a new awareness did you have that you acted upon that created a huge shift of transformation for you? That will be the first question. So if you can give us some practical examples. I had this awareness of my life, and this is the action I took, and that's where how I increased my light, or how I shifted to a new stage, perhaps. And then the second question I'd like to ask you to consider then is,
maybe let's stop here, Michael, because one question is very powerful already, and then you will say the second one. And since I'm already on the roll, I will answer your question. Which the reason I brought this Esina's teachings is because that's what was very transformational for me. When I learned about that I am actually creator of my reality, that what and the mirroring, right? What Esinas were teaching us about, all ascended masters really teaching us about that we have a power within us to change what we don't like, to heal what it's not healed, what it shows up as a sickness. We are very powerful beings. We can work both ways, for the darkness of us, and we can work for the light of us. We can actually open ourselves to bring more light and to heal. But yes, that comes with the knowledge, that comes with the understanding. So the work needs to be put into it, the willingness first, because we're all able to do that. But then there needs to be the willingness and readiness to do that.
Sorry to interrupt you, darling. What I wanted to ask you was, could you make a practical example of an awareness you had in your life and the action you took that will help people?
Okay, all right. Sure. What comes to my mind as you're asking, I'm sorry, my screen is keep frozen, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you. Are you complete? I'm sorry. Okay, so the example that I can bring that comes to my mind immediately, it's a beautiful example, I think will allow people to understand, all of us to understand that. It's I had dispute with my daughter once, and not only once, but I'm bringing that example. She was teenager, and I was very intensely working on just that principle that I can change. I can actually change everything that I am seeing, and I don't like what I see, and that's the suffering and pain for me, and it hurts my heart, it hurts my body, and it actually physically, because I was so open to this, my body actually started to manifest physical symptoms because I was in a suffering, which I was doing this to myself, certainly. But I was so open and willing and kept asking to help me to transform this, and to show me the way, to teach me. So to teach me of my higher self, I kept asking, please teach me, show me the way, give me the examples. And examples comes in experiences of life. So of course, very shortly after I asked, the example came, the experience came. We had an argument, and that argument was kept going on. So two egos on both sides, none of them wanted to surrender. So as long as we were playing that ball on the tennis courts, right, one to one side and one to another, this continued on. And then the voice in my head, stop. I listened and stop. So I stopped throwing that ball to her court. And I said to her, I'm sorry, I have to go for a walk. This is not going anywhere. I need a fresh air. I need to get perspective to all of this. And I'm just gonna need to go. And what I remember was winter and snow, very deep and cold. So I took my jacket, I ran out, and she was standing there like, what, in the middle of this argument? I'm just leaving. And I left, and I walked around the block, I don't know how many times. It was a night. And as I walk around, I ask my higher self to teach me, to tell me, to explain to me, and show me the way out of this, because this is suffering, this is pain, this is hurting each other. I don't want that. This is not what I want. So I hear in my head, so what do you want? What outcome do you want? And I said, well, I want the love. I want the love to be present between us. Understanding, mutual understanding that comes with that love and peace, that it's a result of it, and joyful experience of being with each other. And so you can change it. The voice said, you can change it. How can I change it? I was like on a fire with this anger and upset and disappointment and hurt. You have to change your heart in order for that, the state of your heart, in order for that to be reflected outside. So I understood that right there. All I was doing after that, walking, I was beaming love to myself, and I was beaming love with my mind's awareness to my daughter, until I felt peace, until I felt total harmony, which beautifully you said it before, because that's exactly where it all comes from. There was no harmony between my heart and my mind. There was no harmony between my feelings and my thoughts. Yeah. And if those two are not in harmony, there's disharmony, and the fight, it happens. So I work really hard to do that, to bring that harmony to my heart and to my mind. And peace came, and the feeling of joyful understanding came. And I was ready to come back home.
In a shift of—
Yeah, I shifted.
Yeah.
I shifted the consciousness, I shifted the vibration, I shifted the frequency, I shifted the whole electromagnetic field, right? Electrons and the magnetism of it. So, yeah. And I came home at that time. I opened the door, and there was my daughter standing by the door with her open arms, embracing me, hugging me and kissing me, and saying, I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I have no idea what happened. I love you. And this was so silly. And we never do this again. Of course, it wasn't that we never do this again, but at that moment, it shifted. We had a beautiful evening.
Thank you. A beautiful story. What I love about the story is that you listened first, You
Yeah.
you had to be curious, and you listened, and then you took the advice. That's two major things that you shared within that. I think that's a lesson for all of us. Listen, and what the advice actually is. Be open to that, and then so thank you.
And obey. Listen and obey. Listen and obey. Ask. Well, the first step is ask. You need to ask, right? Because we have a free will. This is the game of free will. If we don't ask, it's not given. But when we're ready, you can ask. Then we listen, and then we obey what it comes.
Thank you for that sharing. That's beautiful. Let's go to Laura. We haven't got much time left. Laura, what awareness did you have, and what action did you take on that awareness that resulted in a shift for you?
Yeah, so the two things that sort of came to mind, the two experiences in my life. The first one was I was completely asleep. I was a senior in college. I was dating a guy for 3 years in college. We were like, campus. Everyone knew who we were. It was sort of that idyllic, the best player on one team is with the best player on the other team. And he was actually Muslim, and it was actually my first introduction to, and he was devoutly Muslim. So he woke up, he did every morning he prayed, did Ramadan. Like, it was really actually I'm actually very grateful for the experience with him, because he was so dedicated in his practices. And being an athlete is not easy when you are fasting. But yeah, so we were together, and 2 weeks before my finals of my senior year, so I'm supposed to be graduating, he still has a year left. I had offers to go and play professional basketball, which I didn't follow through on because we were going to be together forever. And he still had a year of college left. And of course, the lesson in that whole thing for me was, if he really did unconditionally love me, he would have been the one person saying, go and play professionally, right? But my worth was so caught up in pleasing, that I wasn't able to recognize that. And anyway, so 2 weeks before finals, I woke up in my dorm, and we basically lived together. I rarely slept in my dorms, but I would always sleep there the night before games. I woke up and the voice, which is not really outside of me, but it's like inside of me, but it's not my voice. And I was like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. And it was like, it's over, you have to break up with him. And I went, wow. Yeah. And I sat up in bed, and I actually immediately turned to my roommate and I said, I'm breaking up with him. Yeah. My roommate was like, you're an idiot. You're not breaking. You're like going to be together forever. Like, if you guys don't make it, nobody will make it. Like, that was the perception that everyone had of us. And that was the story that I had bought into, that I needed to play that role. And so I did break up with him 2 weeks before finals. I actually still don't know how I managed to graduate, because I probably bombed all my finals. So, and he was very angry over it. And he said really, really hurtful things and very painful things, to the point where he was like, I hated coming to all of your games, watching you play, blah, 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 blah. Wow. And the following year, because I had no plan on life after graduation, because everything was tied up with him, and his journey, that I ended up, it was a complete shift, right? It was a complete timeline shift for me. And I ended up, that's when I started my coaching career. And I actually, even on this healing journey that I'm on now, I credit that to the moment where my contract with Lily came into existence. And so he showed up, he walks into the gym. So that was the end of April, beginning of May. And he showed up and walked into our gym, our first home game, that following November. Now, this came from the person who hated watching every game that he ever watched me play. And he hated watching basketball. And he walked in with his wife and 2 kids.
Oh my God.
And I just went,
wow.
Wait, what? Wow. Like, and one was a baby, one was in a pram, and that was just, wow. That was just a real moment for me of like, the shift in the time, and how quickly and who's to know, because in the Muslim faith, you're allowed 7 wives. Now, he had always told me that he would never do that. That wasn't what he was interested in. So who knows? But the fact is it was a complete timeline shift for me. And the second one was when I was wrongfully dismissed from my job so I finally got to the top of my career, my professional career, in 2015. And I was wrongfully dismissed from my job, and it was a 6-figure job, supporting my whole family, all of the benefits. We were living in the States at the time, and it was in New York, and I was living in Philadelphia. I drove from New York all the way back to Philadelphia, and I cried the whole way, because I actually literally was forced to drive up there just to be fired, because they couldn't do it over the phone, come back home. And I was essentially fired because I people pleased, and I trusted people. And I wasn't aware that other people didn't think the same way I thought. That was the first time in my life. Now I'm 36 at this point. And that was my first shift in consciousness of like, oh my God, my truth is not everyone else's truth.
Wow.
Small t here. And I cried the whole way home, and I just wanted to walk in and just be held. And when I had, the way you empty your desk and you have your box, and I had to knock on the door to open. And my partner at the time opened the door, and he was crying. And it was just, within me just went, I'm so tired of holding people. Like, when is someone just going to hold me? Do you know what I mean? And I just went, oh, total shift. And that was another total shift of consciousness for me. And from those 2 points on, I'm very clear now in my mind what I want for myself, emotionally, from relationships, not necessarily just romantic relationships, but there's major alarm bells go once my boundary is triggered in that regard now, of where I feel like there's no reciprocity. And so that was really my 2 major moments when I look back on timeline shifts.
Thank you for sharing that, Laura. So beautiful stories. And what I love from your story and Nana's story, it's almost like life wants us to awaken. So it just gives us continually the support to awaken, and it's in the experiences we happen, even if we hate them. That's kind of what they you go, I can't believe, I don't want this, isn't what I want. But life is saying, I'm supporting you to awaken. I gave you this gift and you didn't take it. What are you doing here?
Well, it's really so obvious, isn't it? It's almost very simple. Like, the process isn't easy.
Yeah. Well, it's simple, but it's not
simple.
easy. But certainly it's not easy. We know.
Not at the time.
But everything outside of you is just a signpost back to yourself. It's back to your divinity.
That's true.
Right.
And
so
in that regard, sometimes I think people go, oh, it can't be that simple as asking for help. But it really is. Sometimes it's not easy, but it's simpler than I think it's made out to be.
And it's amazing gift in it. So we have to always remember that there is a gift in every pain, in every hurt, in every challenge, every fight that we have. There is always gift. We just have to claim it, and not until we claim it, it's going to continue on. So it's going to repeat itself, and that's what we are being reactive in all our relationships, right? So switching from reaction to response from our heart, the true response from our heart is the healing process, because we claim the wholeness of ourselves. And I always say what healing is when somebody asks me. It is a wholeness. It's a journey to the wholeness of the soul. Through the wounds that we acquire, through the experiences, through the challenges, through the fights, through all of this, the wholeness with our heart, the wholeness with our mind, the harmony. The wholeness is the harmony, because we are not whole if we're not in harmony. There is separation, there is fight. But where is the harmony? The most important law. There is the balance, and there's the integration, and there is oneness in all of parts of us, in and out.
Thank you so much, Anna and Laura, for your sharing beautiful stories.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Laura.
I want to just finish up the podcast with this question for everyone. And consider this in your life, that you're in a state of suffering. What awareness do you have that you haven't acted on, or you're not the embodiment of right now?
Great question.
Or If you don't have the awareness, then what awareness are you ready to, or new understanding are you ready for? Because you might not even have that awareness yet. So therefore, in that circumstance, if you don't have any awareness, then that's the first place to start. Look for a new awareness. Be curious about life. Be curious about your life. Ask questions and look for a new awareness to come. And when that new awareness comes, if it's use your discernment and your love to step into your power and take the action of that new awareness, and that will result in your shift. It's so lovely speaking to all of you. We look forward to speaking.
Thank you.
God bless you all, and may you all be free of suffering.
Namaste.